right, officially. Welcome to this session of the Tenbound Conference, the new sales enablement formula, empowering SDRs to ramp faster and sell more. Today's speakers are Howard Brown and Andy Paul. Howard Brown is the founder and CEO of RingDNA, where he fosters an innovative, fast-growing, and collaborative culture. A three-time entrepreneur and former clinical psychologist, Howard's thought leadership on sales, entrepreneurship, and artificial intelligence has appeared on Bloomberg TV, Fox Business, Forbes, and Entrepreneur Magazine, and is a frequent speaker at industry conferences such as Dreamforce and AWS Revenant. Howard has been listed as one of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs of 2019 by Goldman Sachs and a top CEO according to Comparably. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you,
Andy
Scott.
Paul, no problem. Andy Paul is a best-selling author of Amp Up Your Sales and Zero Time Selling. Andy Paul is number 8 on LinkedIn's list of the top 50 global sales experts to follow. With more than 170,000 followers, Andy is a highly sought-after speaker and sales sage who interviews the world's foremost sales minds and extraordinarily interesting people to bring you strategies and insights that you can use to generate epic wins and massive values. I'll pass things over to Andy. Welcome.
Scott, thank you very much. And welcome, everybody, for joining us here today. And we're going to jump right into it. We're going to talk about, what we've been going through here the last several months. Bridge Group talked about that roughly 30% of companies have laid off some number of SDRs, AEs, but at the same time, what we're seeing is that companies are relatively optimistic about what's going to come in the next 2-3 quarters and in 2021, and 71% of companies expecting relatively little impact or to have a rebound of their business. So that means hiring, right? So bringing on new SDRs, new AEs, onboarding them, ramping people, and getting them to be productivity or getting them to productivity more quickly. So Howard, everyone sort of nods their heads and agrees that's desirable to be able to onboard SDRs and AEs faster, but it's really not just a nice to have, and it's not a nicety. It's something that really has economic value to it. And maybe you could explain what that is for us.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's great to be here. Thank you, Andy. Clearly in great company, and I appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you anytime. So,
as always, yes.
Thank you. So I love the fact that 71% of companies think they're going to start hiring right away or fairly soon. It's great news. I may be somewhat less optimistic, which really points to the importance of why when we do hire, we make sure we make the right hires and that we get them onboarded and trained in an effective and efficient manner. The slide above, you'll see the difference between a rep that's fully ramped in 6 months in the blue line and a rep that is fully ramped in 9 months. It's a massive difference, right? So if my rep has a $50,000 a month quota once they're fully ramped, if they're ramped in 6 months, they will have generated $475,000 in revenue for the company, as opposed to a rep that takes 9 months. In 9 months, they will have generated $387,000 in revenue. So roughly a $88,000 difference per rep. Now, if I have 10 reps, which
it's 20% difference more, yeah.
It's $880,000 a year in additional revenue. If I have 100 reps, it's $8.8 million. So the difference of 3 months, a reduction in 3 months of ramp time could be for a company with 100 reps, $8.8 million.
Yeah, in this case, we're talking specifically about AEs, but the math applies to SDRs as well.
Yeah, if you have a 25% win rate, you can basically take the difference in revenue and divide that or times that number by 4, and you'll have to generate, roughly 4 times the $475,000 for your 6-month rep. So you're talking close to $2 million in pipeline versus. Anyway, you get the math. I'm going to
Yeah. No, but I mean, the fact is it's significant, right? Is that, people develop at different rates, but the fact is you want to have in place a process, starting with how you hire, that enables people to get to the point they need to get faster. and it's not guesswork. You can actually be very deliberate about it. Somehow our slides reset, sorry. So let's get into what it takes to onboard faster. And it really starts with who you hire and how you hire.
Absolutely. And who you hire has never been more important, because as we showed in the slide before, it's really about getting people to that full quota as soon as possible, making sure that they have the right training, the right coaching to get there. So what does that require? It requires that we find people who are coachable. People who have been coached in the past, who know how to take lessons and synthesize that into their own experience. And we
can do that in how we interview people. This is the point, is that we can discern these things before we hire people.
Absolutely. We like to hire people that have experience. It doesn't have to be in sales, but it certainly helps. Quick learners, quick studies. We like people who understand the math, right? Sales is you have to understand the math of sales. You talk about that a lot.
Mm-hmm. So give us an example, though, of what you're saying when they say they need to know the math of sales.
Well, you have to understand the numbers, right? You have to have some business acumen. You have to understand, in the previous slide, when we're talking about revenue, what revenue means and what kind of expense and the ROI of your investments. There's a variety of things that most people in business think about. And if you're selling to people, in this case, sales, you better understand ramp time. You better understand margin. You should understand COGS. There's a variety of basic business acumen that you should be assessing for when hiring a rep. And
including it in your onboarding process. I mean, this is the thing that you and I have talked about before is there's this sort of shortage of this basic acumen in sellers. And if they're not picking it up in school or previous experience, is you need to be able to provide that.
Absolutely. And look, it's not magic to get somebody to a full ramped quota fast, but it does take work and it takes a process.
And before you jump process, the one thing you alluded to is culture. So I think companies maybe don't spend enough time making sure people are really a fit, because this has a lot to do with their chances to succeed. So what are you screening for in terms of culture?
Well, you want to make sure that whomever you're meeting with, when you're thinking about hiring, has a passion, right? You want to make sure that they have a passion for things that align to your company's values, your mission, the things that really are important to your organization. We look for people who like to take responsibility, who like to deliver value with every conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We take integrity and trust, and certainly people talk about those things, but those are really critical things, and you can, through the interview process, really screen for that. And go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, character is what you're talking about. This is something that when you're looking at culture fit, is character is really important. Integrity, as you said, trust, their own values. Do they align with those of the company?
Yeah, I mean, in my 8th graders class, they have a sign at the front of every classroom that says "Character counts."
Yeah, doesn't it? I mean, that's okay. So let's talk a little bit about then the next thing that I think is really important in terms of onboarding is making sure your managers or your coaches are enabled to make this happen.
Absolutely. And I think, the reason I brought up process, I really do think a big part of the early process of onboarding people is introducing them to your company culture, introducing them to the founding story, the mission, why they're doing what they're doing, and how it will impact the businesses they serve, why the conversations they have with prospects matter, and why it's important to deliver value. Even if you're not selling your product, be valuable, be an asset to those you spend time with. That is a really important part of the onboarding process, really making sure people understand they're part of a team, they share values, they're working towards the same goals, shared KPIs, all critically important to the process.
So then back to the previous question, so how are your managers then enabled to reinforce that or to deliver that message and then reinforce it going forward?
Yeah, well, I think in a lot of cases, it involves the founder, the CEO, if possible. So we have onboarding classes where I spend an hour and a half with each onboarding class talking about the company, talking about the founding story, making sure that every individual within the organization knows that story, understands our value, is keenly aware of the portal where we have all of this material. It also is part of our coaching training, and the slides are moving like crazy in the back.
Yeah, and I'm not touching them. I apologize to the audience, but
it's all good. I like the flashing lights. It keeps me active.
Yeah, something has taken over. But go ahead.
I think to your point, it's really enabling your coaches to be great coaches. How are you training them? I think a lot of people think about their top sales executives, for example, and just assume they're going to be wonderful coaches or wonderful trainers. It's not the case. You have to teach a coach how to coach. You have to teach a trainer how to train. And if they have those skills, then they could properly train their team. So you want to make sure your sales enablement program involves training not just for your reps, but reinforces the training and the outcome of that training for your managers and coaches.
And then use your tools and technology to reinforce that as well.
100%.
So give us an example of how that works at RingDNA.
Yeah, so at RingDNA, and there's a variety of tools we use. Obviously, RingDNA is a core piece of our technology, but we believe that it's critically important to both listen to how successful reps handle calls and demos, and listen to how reps have been less than successful. So really pay attention to real phone calls. Listen to calls where certain aspects of the calls have been flagged by managers or coaches through our conversation AI platform. For example, there are libraries of calls where pricing objection was handled well, where features are well aligned to the value or the problem that the prospect may be having. The idea that there is competition. How do we compete against our competitors? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? And how to be transparent. So it's only through this process of listening to your peers' calls and actually reviewing their calls, having them review your calls, that we're able to really help them speed that ramp process. Another really important piece of this is using the technology for role playing. Our ability to role play calls with not prospects to begin with, but actual managers, their peers, and then through the tool, annotate those calls, flag those calls, drop those calls into best practice libraries is really, really beneficial.
Well, and what you're bringing up, and when you talk about during the onboarding process, is this idea of self-education. Part of it, when you have this type of technology and these tools, is you have to take responsibility as the rep, as an AE, as an SDR for using them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's metrics in place that surface when somebody has paid attention to the learning program, and then when those have not. We also evaluate the coaches and trainers. For example, if calls are surfaced that need coaching, that's great. If the coach spends time with the rep, training them, and then the rep's performance actually decreases, that's great insight because we need to spend more time with our coaches and trainers. So it's not just about the rep, it's really evaluating across the entire enterprise, everybody who's involved in the process. In the same vein, we evaluate every single part of the sales process, whether it's the marketing source that's routed a lead to a particular rep, how they handled that marketing lead, or an outbound sales sequence in our guided selling product, where we're evaluating every single email, every SMS, as well as the transcriptions and the sentiment and all of the metrics around the actual conversation, all the way through to the learning and training module that really looks at the outcomes of those calls.
Yeah, and then, as you said, no shortage of information for the reps, SDRs, AEs, or the coaches themselves to say, yeah, we understand, or we have a better insight, let's say, into what's happening here. And here are the levers we can pull to try to make improvement in our performance.
Absolutely.
So we talk about onboarding being just the first step and really a self-development process, right? I mean, it's getting you to a certain point, but once you're up to a certain point after 90 days, that's not the end. That's really just the beginning of the beginning, right?
It absolutely is. I listened to your podcast, Andy, and at just about every single podcast, you mention a new book that you've read or you're interviewing an author. I think one thing that holds true about just about every great salesperson, sales manager, sales leader I've ever met is they have a constant thirst and hunger for learning. They're constantly looking to improve their game, their skill set. They're constantly looking for motivation. And I think that in today's world where we're constantly introducing new features, new products, the market is changing rapidly, our competitors are changing rapidly, our ability to better ourselves in how we handle objections and how we speak to one another, our ability to look at what really moves the needle for us because we have those outcomes is so critical. And the best reps, the ones that are constantly hitting their number, exceeding their quotas, are the ones that are constantly trying to improve in their craft. You take those reps and you use them as a model. I want to learn from people who are absolutely winning, and I focus on those people. I surface the learning. That's why I listen to your podcast. That's why I'm constantly reading books.
Right.
It's really important. It's why people are on this webinar today.
Yeah, well, I look back to my own experience when I first started in sales. Is I glommed onto the number one seller in our office, and I said, "I'm going on calls with you because I want to learn how you're doing it." Because he just made it look so much easier than everybody else. So, if you're new, that's what you want to do. Now, we're also ignoring our slides for a second. Is and one of the things that's sort of phenomenon that's happening now is that a lot of field sellers have been working from home. It's unclear exactly when they're going to go back to the field. So there's really this opportunity that exists right now is to sort of do a lot of cross training between field reps to help them become better selling on the phone and become better inside sellers, which, chances are they're going to be adopting much more of a hybrid model going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the conversations I've had recently with a very senior RVP at Salesforce was around the changes he's had to make in his job. He used to go and visit some of the largest brands in the world. He'd go meet with them, have face-to-face interactions. All of that has changed. And so he's been sitting in on a lot of trainings of new inside sales reps. Not only is he learning skills that he didn't necessarily have, like how to build rapport on Zoom or how to communicate the value prop when you're not in front of a whiteboard or have a slide in front of you. He's been able to grow in his craft, but there's an additional value by including him in these onboarding sessions or training sessions. He's actually able to impart his experience of selling the product, in this case, Salesforce, to the new junior reps, SDRs, new AEs, because he's experienced. So not only is he gaining by learning how to sell in this new inside sales motion, but he's helping reps in other aspects that he's gained experience over the past 15 years while at Salesforce.
Yeah, and they're benefiting from each other's expertise and experience. But I think this one of the points that's really critical is that field reps, their productivity metrics really change, right? Is at least from an activity standpoint, is if you're sitting there saying, look, I'm planning my day, I'm going to have time to make 5 calls out in the field. Yeah, how are you using your time now, right? Your outreach opportunities increase pretty exponentially.
Yeah, and what are the tools to help you be more effective in that outreach, in that follow-up. There is all kinds of tools out there to help with outreach and engagement. Making sure your message is on point. And so it's really critical right now to take advantage of those tools, not just for the inside sales reps, but for your field sales reps as well.
All right, Howard, perfect. I think we're ending right on time. Look at that.
Excellent.
Scott, did we have any questions?
None yet, but if you do have a couple questions, now is the time. We can go just a few minutes over for some Q&A if there is any. One question that kind of came up when we were doing some talking for this was the importance of the transparency, as some sales teams are like, I'm keeping my secrets here because I'm going to, kill my quota and I don't want to, share basically. How do you instill that that transparency level, and does it begin right with the onboarding? I assume so, but.
Andy, I'd love to hear your thoughts around tribal knowledge and why it's so important.
Yeah, I think what's obviously one of the difficulties in this work from home time is, right, you start losing some of that tribal knowledge, people just sitting next to each other and hearing what someone else is doing and experiencing, firsthand someone else's successes. But I think as a manager, you have such a huge role in establishing what that culture is, what the expectation is, and whether you're setting up people in sort of fiefdoms or whether it's people feel like they're in it together. That's a collective effort to achieve your goals, and that you cheer your teammates on, and it's not protective because you know that if you give to somebody, you're likely to learn something in return. And that's always the way I approached it if I can share knowledge with somebody and then I learn something in return, I'm way better off for it.
Yeah, and I think building transparency at the outset, that we talked about the culture of the company. If you have a culture that's really about building team and working together and transparency, and you have tools like Conversation AI that surfaces these learning moments, and people can feel really proud of the fact that they did something and it becomes a best practice within your organization, that fuels people.
Absolutely.
Well, no other questions have come in, and we're now over time, so I feel like we should maybe just wrap it up. Any parting words before we leave the audience?
Howard?
Stay safe, stay healthy.
Exactly.
I know we all are looking forward to getting back to work and in person, and thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Have a great day, everyone.